The training hall of the Galactic Coalition Academy smelled like ozone and alien sweat, 36 species crammed into one echoing chamber on the moon of Vareth 6, all of them strangers to one another, most of them strangers to defeat. Mara Ellison was not a stranger to either. She stood at the back of Formation C, 5'4" in her gray cadet uniform, brown hair pulled into a knot so tight it ached. Around her, beings who had never heard of Earth studied her with the particular contempt of those who had already decided what something was worth before looking closely. The Dreth to her left, 7 feet tall, 4-armed, skin like hammered copper, had not bothered to hide his assessment. He'd leaned toward his unit mate on the first day and said, in the universal tongue that all cadets were required to speak, "A human. They sent us a human. I've seen their medical scans. Their bones break if you look at them wrong." Mara had heard him. She hadn't looked up from her datapad. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, Commander Kale Veyron had scheduled Combat Integration Assessment, the one exercise every first-year cadet dreaded, because it wasn't about strength scores or weapons simulations. It was about reading a situation, adapting, and surviving contact with something you hadn't trained for. Veyron himself was Solhari, lean and silver-skinned, with compound eyes that caught light like broken glass. He had been training cadets for 40 years. He had seen species come through this hall who could bend steel with their fingertips, who could interface directly with ship systems using neural threads, who could survive vacuum exposure for 6 minutes. He had also seen them crack under pressure, freeze when the variables changed, and fall apart the moment the plan stopped working. He had never trained a human before. He was curious. The assessment format was simple: 1 cadet, center floor, against a randomized environmental scenario. The scenario could be anything: debris field navigation, hostage extraction, equipment failure under fire. You didn't know what you were walking into until you were already in it. The other cadets watched from the observation ring above. Dravak, the Dreth who had made the remark on day 1, went third. He bulldozed through a structural collapse scenario with brute force and emerged in 4 minutes, barely winded. The observation ring cheered. He looked up at Mara with an expression that didn't need translation. "Your turn is coming." It came after the lunch interval. "Cadet Ellison." Veyron's voice carried no inflection. "Center floor." She walked down. No hurry. No performance. The floor sealed behind her. The lights dimmed to emergency red. And then the scenario loaded. It was a medical emergency, a simulated coalition shuttle, interior, 3 crew members incapacitated by an unknown atmospheric contaminant. 1 pilot was still semi-conscious but couldn't reach the controls. The shuttle was in a slow tumble. The communication array was offline. Standard emergency protocols were locked behind a command-level clearance the cadet didn't have. It was, objectively, a scenario designed for a cadet with medical training, piloting experience, and systems override knowledge. Most cadets had one of those things. Mara Ellison, per her intake file, had listed her prior experience as field medic, rural terrain navigation, competitive freefall, and general mechanical repair. Veyron watched the timer start. Up in the observation ring, Dravak crossed 2 of his 4 arms. "She'll ask for a hint in 90 seconds, he said to the unit around him. "Humans panic. It's physiological, their cortisol response overwhelms their executive function." Several cadets nodded. They'd read the same xenobiology primers. Mara did not ask for a hint. She moved through the shuttle cabin fast and quiet, checking each body with practiced hands, 2 fingers to the neck, eyes to the chest, a quick look at the skin for chemical discoloration. Field triage. 10 seconds per person. She was already talking aloud, not panicking, just processing: contaminant. Not airborne, or I'd be symptomatic too. Ingested or contact. Crew shows no burns, ingested. Timeline: they're stable, not getting worse. Okay. She pulled the semi-conscious pilot toward the controls. The pilot was Chthoni, a species with a slightly different body plan, limbs articulated differently, seat designed for their physiology. Mara didn't waste time trying to sit the pilot upright in a chair built for a human. She positioned them sideways, braced them with her own body, and said, "I need one hand. Just one. Can you do that?" The simulated pilot gave a faint response. One hand lifted. "Point at what I need to touch," Mara said. "Don't try to explain. Just point." 22 seconds later, the tumble slowed. She found the communications array offline not because it was broken, because someone had tripped the emergency cutoff switch during the initial incident, standard protocol to prevent accidental distress signals during a drill. She recognized the toggle because she'd seen the same design on a different ship class, third page of the optional technical supplement that most cadets had skimmed. She hadn't skimmed it. Array back online. Distress signal sent. She used the command override bypass, not the locked one, the maintenance one, tucked in the secondary manual that was technically above her clearance level to read but not actually encrypted, to flag the medical emergency on the crew manifest. Then she sat on the floor next to the pilot, kept one hand on their wrist to monitor pulse, and waited. Total time elapsed, 6 minutes, 41 seconds. The lights came up. The scenario ended. The observation ring was quiet. Veyron stood very still at his console. He'd seen the maintenance bypass used exactly once before, by a cadet in her third year who'd spent the prior summer working salvage contracts. He had never seen a first-year cadet find it. He pulled up Mara's file again. General mechanical repair. She'd written it casually, like it was a footnote. What she hadn't mentioned, what he found in the deeper record, was that she'd spent 4 years fixing mining equipment in an off-grid settlement on a planet with 1 doctor, 2 engineers, and no manufacturer support. She hadn't repaired things by following instructions. She'd repaired things by understanding them. He closed the file. Dravok said nothing. He was doing the math that the rest of them were doing, running back through her 6 minutes and 41 seconds and finding that there was no moment she'd wasted, no motion she'd repeated, no breath she'd spent on panic. One of the other cadets, a Velhari named Saris who had scored top marks in systems theory, leaned on the railing. "She read the maintenance manual," she said quietly. "Not a question." "Apparently," said someone else. "The optional one." Silence. Commander Veyron did not give speeches. It was not his style. He debriefed each cadet in 2 minutes, noted what they'd done well, noted what had room for growth, and moved on. He spent 4 minutes on Mara Ellison. "The pilot repositioning was efficient," he said. "Using them as an interface rather than attempting to compensate for the physiology difference yourself, that was correct thinking. The maintenance bypass was," he paused. A very slight pause. "Unexpected." "It was in the manual," Mara said. "The optional manual. I read all the manuals." Veyron studied her for a moment. Those compound eyes didn't blink the way human eyes did, so she couldn't tell what he was thinking. But he nodded, once, with a precision that felt like something more than a nod. "You'll do," he said. Coming from Kale Veyron, 40 years in the field, it was known among cadets to be the highest compliment he gave. That evening in the common area, Dravok sat across from Mara at a table. He didn't apologize, Dreth didn't, as a cultural practice, but he set a food container down in front of her. It was the Dreth equivalent of a gesture of respect, sharing rations. She looked at it. Looked at him. "Your bones don't break if I look at them wrong," he said. "No," she agreed. "I looked it up." "Humans have," he searched for the word. "A high pain tolerance. Relative to your skeletal density. You feel things that would incapacitate other species and you keep moving." Mara picked up the food container. "We had to," she said simply. "For a long time, we didn't have what you have. So we worked with what we did have." Dravok considered that. 4 arms folded. What did you have? She thought about 4 years in a broken-down mining settlement fixing things that weren't meant to be fixed, reading every manual she could find, learning how to keep people alive with what was on hand. Time, she said. And no choice but to figure it out. Dravok was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What else is in the optional manuals?" Mara almost smiled. "Sit down," she said. "I'll tell you." In the 40-year career of Commander Kale Veyron, he would train 119 cadets to graduation. He would later say, when asked, that the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered in that hall was not the cadet who was strongest, or fastest, or best connected to the systems of the ship. It was the one who had read every word of every manual, and still had questions.